Zalowski. This is not Crash Course, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the poetry and life of Gwendolyn Brooks. Let's get right into it. The records of Brooks's writing can be traced back to a very young age. In fact, hey Emily, Gwendolyn published her very first poem at age 13. You're 17. What are you doing with your life? A relevant and hurtful question, me from the past. Although, you're not wrong. At age 13, Brooks published her poem Eventide in American Childhood magazine in 1930. It being her first poem, it's notably different from her later and more acclaimed publications. She writes, "When the sun sinks behind the mountains and the sky is besprinkled with color and the neighboring brook is peacefully still, with a gentle, silent ripple now and then, when flowers send forth odors and the grass is uncommonly green, and the air is tranquilly sweet, and children flock to their mothers' sides, then worry flees and comfort presides, for all know it welcoming the evening." In this short poem, Brooks speaks of nature and a sense of calmness it gives. Her language is flowery and sets a descriptive and beautiful scene where the people in the world she creates are at peace. As Brooke matures, though, and gains more experience in life, her work does the same. Born on June 7th, 1916 in Topeka, Kansas, Brooks moved to the south side of Chicago during the Great Migration at a very young age and grew up throughout the Great Depression there. Her father was a janitor who hoped to become a doctor, and her mother was a school teacher. She was very shy and isolated in high school, and according to a very close friend of hers from childhood, George Kent, was rejected by many of her own race due to her light skin, nice hair, and lack of social and athletic ability. This social rejection, along with the societal rejection she received due to her being an African American woman, are very much reflected in her work. One major theme Brooks often covered was sexual oppression, taking an almost feminist point of view on things and showing, such as in her poem Sadie and Maud, that an independent woman can flourish no matter how society looks at her. Sadie and Maud depicts two sisters' lives. One, Maud, who chooses to go down the traditional route for a girl and what's expected of her in society, whereas the other, Sadie, chooses to make her own path and comb that path with a fine-toothed comb. In fact, she describes Sadie as such. Sadie was one of the livingest chicks in all the land. She then explains how Sadie bore two babies under her maiden name. Maud and Ma and Papa nearly died of shame. But after Sadie had lived her life just the way she wanted to, Brooks states that she passed along that fine-toothed comb to her own daughters, helping them to make their own paths in the world as well. And the sister who did what society told her to? Well, Brooks describes Maud as a thin brown mouse. She is living all alone in this old house. She really didn't like people doing what was expected of them, did she? Hey, isn't your plan to go to college and live a pretty expected life just like Maud did? Once again, me from the past, your words are relevant and hurtful. But again, you're right in saying that she advocated for breaking from social norms. You could almost say some of her messages in that respect pull from transcendentalist philosophy. How going out and living your own life in the world is the best way to experience everything, like what Sadie chose to do. Apart from sexual oppression and transcendentalist messages, Brooks uses one major theme above all others in her works. Maturing through the civil rights movement, Brooks uses her poetry as a tool to describe and advocate for change and equality. In her poem Truth, Brooks uses the sun as a symbol to represent the dawn of a new age in civil rights. In this text, though, she speaks of how easy it is to avoid this day of change and how sweet it is to sleep in the coolness of snug unawareness, and how the dark hangs heavily over the eyes. She describes how change may not always bring with it what we think it will, and how simple it is to stay hidden in the familiar and almost inescapable darkness that is the current times. She uses an extremely similar metaphor in her poem Speech to the Young, Speech to the Progress Toward as well, in which she calls out to the reader, say to them, say to the downkeepers, the sun slappers, the self-soilers, the harmony hushers, even if you are not ready for day, it cannot always be night. She commands her reader to ignite change, using day versus night to explain the difference between a dark, oppressive, and discriminatory time from an enlightened and equal one. Hey, Emily, in her first poem, didn't she make night or the evening signify comfort coming for the families and people in the poem? It's kind of the opposite now, and I'm confused. Well, me from the past, remember that Eventide was her very first poem. We can't hold every poet to the devices and metaphors that they used before, especially when they were only 13. Although you do bring up a really interesting point that shows off how much she's matured, become aware of the world around her, and developed as a purposefully political writer using these forces of nature to draw parallels to our own worlds. Actually, much of her poetry, due to its political content, was received in very polar ways as well. Many were disgusted by its messages of sexual and racial equality, but even more developed a love and passion for it. In fact, her book, A Street in Bronzeville, became an instant success after being published in 1945. And another one of her published books, Annie Allen, secured her the Pulitzer Prize in 1950, making her the very first African American to do so. Today, we can use these poems to inspire ourselves. She helped create a window into the lives of minorities in America during the Civil Rights Age, and we can draw from the experiences of those she wrote about, the hardships and discrimination that they faced, to help inspire us to take actions for our own rights and equality, whether it regard race, gender, or sexual orientation. She drew on the rebellious nature of a young generation. She wrote about being the change you want to see, and appealed to the commonality between every new generation. There are things you want changed in the world, so go do it. And even today, her words still command us. Go do it. Thanks for watching. I'm Emily Wazalowski, and if you liked this, please give us an A. This episode's content was researched by Katie Wiesner, Canoe Lore, Andrew Kennard, and myself. This episode was also written by myself and Canoe Lore, as well as directed by myself. Music was performed by special guest Aaron Bry, and thanks to my production team of Nathan Wazalowski. If you have any questions, leave a comment below, and our team of poetry experts will do their best to answer them. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and as we say in our hometown, she real cool.